Alright, so, hello you beautiful people. It's been a while. So, in the last video, I showed you guys how to install Python and how to create your first Hello World program. And in that, I already touched upon variables and chaining strings together. We will be talking about variables and strings. Well, look, we'll be talking about variables pretty much all the time. However, about strings I'll be talking in the next video because there's a lot more to it than I've mentioned in the first one. So today I figured we'll be talking about numbers in Python and what kinds of numbers there are. In Python there are three numeric types. We have integers, floats, and complex numbers. The most used ones that you will come across are integers and float numbers. Complex ones are used, but they are not as much, at least from my point of view and from my use case. To keep this as simple as possible, we'll be just using integers, or int for short, and floats, so that we can have decimal numbers. Basically numbers with decimal points. So I touched upon variables before. So what we can do, in fact, is we can, as an example here, let's define a few number variables. Variables in Python are actually really easy to create, and they are automatically formatted for you, so you do not have to remember which one it was. You just have to know how to write it, which is really cool. So to use Python, pretty much, to use numbers in Python, we can use those three types. However, I'll be just using the first two types which I talked about, and I'm going to show you how you can print out the type of the number you've created. So, to do that, we're going to have to set some variables. So x equals, and I don't know, let's do 1. So that's our first variable set. Next we'll do y equals, let's do 2.8. So now we have set two variables. So the first one right here is a integer, a full set number. It's not a float number because it doesn't have the decimal points. It doesn't have the decimal point, so no numbers behind the decimal point essentially. So what we can do now is we can check the type really easily. To do that we can print it out using the print function, and next we type out what we want to do. So we want to print out the type, so we type in type, and then the variable we want to print out the type from. For example, let's print out the type of x. As you can see, it will say that it's a class of integer, so essentially it's a integer number as I've told you it is. Well, what happens if we print out the type of our y variable? It will say that it's a float, so it's the number with the decimal point. It's called a float. And by doing this, it will print out the type of the variable, which is really neat if you're not sure what kind of variable it is and you just want to check what it has been set as. It's a really neat way of doing this. Now, there are multiple ways you can use integers. So integers by themselves can pretty much have are basically whole numbers, which are positive and negative, and they do not have a decimal. They do not have decimals. So what we can do, in fact, is we can, again, I'm going to, since I have already x as 1, I'm not gonna change it, but I'm gonna change my y number to something extremely long. I don't know, let's do a random number like this. So I've set my y variable like this, and if I print out my type now, you'll notice that, that my number type has changed to integer. So we have essentially replaced our float number with an integer. And integers can also be negative. So let's create another variable. Let's create a z variable. And let's give it a negative, I don't know, 128. And if we decide to print that out, you'll notice that the z variable essentially is also an integer, but it's a negative form. So it can take both negative, positive, and has pretty much an unlimited length. So those are integers basically. Next are floats. floats are basically floating point numbers, so these are used for fairly complex calculations and such. They can be positive and negative as well, and they contain sometimes one or more decimals. So we can do pretty much the exact same thing we did with our x, y, and z variables. We're going to change them now. So what we can do, in fact, is we can what can we do? Let's set our x variable to be equal to I don't know, 1.10, and our y variable to be equal to 1.0, and our z variable to be equal to, I don't know, let's do negative 69, why not? Actually, that's not what I wanted. It's not a float number, and we'll scream at us. So negative 69.9. There we go. And if we decide to print out the types again, you will notice that they will be declared as floats, which is what we want. So to prove it to you, let's print out, we can actually print out all three of those. However, to make it simpler for us, we're just gonna write it out line by line. So let's print out x first and see what we got. And it says it's a float number, which is what we wanted. I could essentially just copy the code from here and just replace one value, so I'm gonna do just that to make my life a bit easier. Let's print out y, you'll see it says float. And let's print out z, and it should say float as well, as you can see it does. So those are basically floats. Now floats can also have a can be also defined with scientific numbers. For example, with the e to indicate the power of 10. So we can basically create a number which has a power of 10 essentially. But you can look it up if you want to. I'm not gonna show that. I mean, I could, but that would be a bit more confusing later on. It will still be a float. Then there are complex numbers. Again, I told you that complex numbers are not used as much. They might be used in different kinds of applications, but for the purposes of this video, we're not gonna delve into that. So type conversion. So you can pretty much convert a number that has been set into a different form. So to reuse our first example, we're going to set x to be equal to 1, and we will set to have a bit of a differential thing here to make something different. We're going to use the 2.8 value for our y number, for our y variable. So essentially what I did here is I defined my x variable as a, actually I can print it out, as an integer, and my y variable as a float. Sorry, there we go. So we have now two different data types. So in programming, you cannot add two different types of numbers. However, you can convert them in order to add them up and such. So to do that, we can convert them fairly easily, in fact. So let's convert them. Let's convert our integer x into a float number. To do that, we'll have to use another variable. Again, Python makes this really easy. Let's use a as our variable, and in order to convert an existing variable to a different data type, all you have to do is type in float, which is the data type you wanted to convert to, and then the variable you want to convert, which in our case is x. Once I run this, again to prove to you that x is still considered an integer, which it is, but our a variable will be considered a float. Because we took the number to show you that it actually has the same value, you can just type in x, it will print out the value. If you type in a, it will print out 1.0. So we took the number a, the variable x, which is over, where is it? which is over here, and we've converted it into a float and stored its value into our a variable. And once we print out the a variable, it will give us the value of 1.0. So the conversion was successful. In fact, to show it, so that's pretty much it. That's conversion. We can also generate, okay, so that's conversion and generating numbers. However, we can generate random numbers as well. So to generate random numbers, we're going to have to do a few things. So we need to call one of Python's built-in modules. Now modules can be thought of something like libraries. Libraries are, we can think of those like boxes with like extra goodies that our program doesn't come with normally. So we can essentially call like specific functions or utilities, if you will, for our program to be used in our code. So to do that, Python makes this really easy. All you have to do is just type in import. As you can see, the color has changed. And then you type in random, because we want to generate random numbers, so we need to import our built-in module called random. So let's type in random. Once we hit this, that's all you need to do to import it. But how do you use it? Well, to use it, we'll just type out print. Confused it with C#. And then we type in random dot, and I think it was rand range. As you can see, it also gives me auto completion. And then we type out basically our starting point and our end point, which will be separated with a column. So let's say we want to generate numbers from 1 to 100, and that's it. So we wanted to print it out a random number from 1 to 100. It's printed out 94. We can copy the code again. Oops, sorry about that. And we can run this again. It's set 80. Run this again, 36. So you can see it works. It prints out the random numbers. And that's pretty much it. There's nothing else to show. This is how you work with numbers within Python. Now, working with numbers in Python, it's like really cool and such, but there's a bunch more different things. I know I said that I'll be talking about strings in the next video, but it's important to mention casting, what casting is, but that will be for the next one. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, share it around, and I will see you guys in the next one. Make sure to stay safe and wash your hands.